Hello, hello, hello. We are recording. Excelente. I'll whip it off just for the audience. I shall whip it off the hands-free. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit shitty. Yeah, can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Good. Well, let's hope the connection runs because I'm currently in a party hostel in, where am I? Puerto Escondido in Mexico, and Wi-Fi is shocking. So let's just hope we can persevere, pull through, and the audio kind of retains a decent enough standards. What did you say to that? Good?
Yeah, it's strange because for the first time ever, it said on WhatsApp, you come up with this like little weird notification, all the connection's really bad.
Oh,
But you
really?
sound like the best you've ever sounded.
Yeah, same. That's what I'm thinking as well. It sounds
It's
really clear,
weird.
but honestly, the Wi-Fi is absolutely shocking here. So let's just hope when it gets converted, the audio stays, of a decent standing, of an upright standing. So, topic today. What episode is this, by the way? I've forgotten.
I feel like it's 6 or 7.
Yeah, 7? Is it 7?
Six. I feel like if it was 6, we'd know because 6 is
Because it's a magic number.
Exactly.
Thing is, I actually think it is 6, though. I think it is 6. Okay, we'll
And
say
you know
6 or
what?
7.
How funny. If it is 6, we're going to talk about some numbers today. Like,
Oh, yeah, we are, absolutely. Yeah. All right, shall we? We'll begin with the thing you just showed me. So the picture. So for the audience, our two audience members in Minnesota, you were just flicking through a drawer or some leaflets or pamphlets or
yeah,
whatever.
just like a pile of posts, like you get like leaflets through with the post and stuff like that. You get like, the local paper, Pizza Hut leaflets, all that kind of nonsense, just all that. And we were just talking about numerology and synchronicity and kind of like the things that NPCs or actualized NPCs, or however you want to view your position within this matrix, and how that kind of how through having like a realization of these things then become more apparent, or more actualized in your day to day. And picked up a leaflet for Wine 52. And I'm also talking about how these companies aware of this numerology, and kind of like reenact it through their marketing. They kind of like throw this out there because these numbers maybe have some kind of resonance, or maybe even like some kind of strange psychological programming effects, like who knows. But anyway, this particular voucher was for £36, which is a very specific number to give somebody a discount of. As we know that we're used to things being rounded off in the society, like, we see lots of fives and tens because I suppose, just like the way we've been programmed with like the numerological system, it's like counting in fives and tens seems very logical.
Yeah.
But
completely. Doesn't make sense, does it? For £36 off, it could be 35, could be 40, could be 39.99, could be 30 even. Though that's still a magic number, it would be reasonable. But 36, it's just putting that out there in people's faces. 3 6s are of course 666. That's the aim of the game.
Indeed, and just all the sixes are there, 6 times 6, and it gets you 3 special wines as well. And special wines is 12 letters. Divide that as 2 words. Divide that by 2. That's 66. It kind of goes on and on. And even their logo, Wine 52, is quite peculiar. Underneath the E, there's like these 3 dots. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you should say that because I was going to mention it earlier when we were chatting. I pinpointed that too, and you see that now a lot. And for me, it's a symbol of the breakup of society. And before everyone's thinking, what was he talking about? Prime example for those of us that use Revolut. Revolut is like a fintech banking app, and I'm just using this as one of many examples. But a lot of companies in recent times have been changing their logos, and not for the better. It's not something that's more aesthetically pleasing. It's not something that's bold or more vivid or has any extra appeal to the market. Revolut just had an ordinary standard R. It was a nice bold R. There's nothing wrong with it. Everyone knew it. They've now corrected it to an R that is broken. It's like a displaced R. It's And I've seen this in so many corporations. You see it all the time. Obviously, you see a standardized kind of symbolism of like, you know, Masonic triangles and stuff embedded. You see A's without the horizontal bar across, so it's just a V, stuff like that. But this kind of breakaway is very much aligned to a lot of the kind of structural symbolism that you see in many countries. So, for example, off the top of my head, if I take Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan, there is a statue which is very common in the USSR, which I've seen not just in the USSR but throughout the world, which is the breaking of plates. So it's essentially like, how do I explain it? Just two men pushing two plates together, two giant sections of the earth, or whatever you want to kind of interpret it as. And obviously they don't have a chance of doing so. So it's almost like a kind of, you're doing it in vain. There's no chance because the waters are against you, you know, and there's no way to stop the tide. And I think it's very symbolic in what you've just said as an example with the whole wine voucher, which has that kind of numerology, that you know, 666 scenario. And then of course they have that letter, which is cast to the same fashion, like with the Revolut example. It's all meant to discern that this is the breakup of modern day culture, and that we're heading in a direction which we know to be, you know, a kind of satanic, deadly devastation, which is coming.
Yeah,
would that be
absolutely
fair?
Yeah, upside down, back to front. There's even like an upside down eye in the logo as well, just to show, you know, like with, you know, with genders and just with kind of displacement of people, and just kind of just really them shaking things up in every way possible. Absolutely. And then like going on with like the numbers, like a very important number is something that we get, you know, told about, and something that gets spoken about by, you know, World Economic Forums and just by various people. It's about the number of people on the planet, and you know, there are varying, you know, views on this, whether we're overpopulated, underpopulated. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be aware of Eric Dubai, and recently he dropped a video about 8.5 minutes long on what he believes to be a population hoax, as in, you know, there aren't as many people as you know, the powers that be claim to be, which has been, you know, a point of contention between, you know, myself and Jonathan, and we're kind of like pondering whether yeah, there's validity in that theory. Just to give you like a brief outline, Eric seems to believe that there's more around maybe 1 to 1.5 billion people on Earth, as opposed to the 8 billion that we're told. I can honestly say that, you know, in the city that I live in, which is London, England, yeah, you can definitely see that there are more people, more traffic, yeah, just more people, more buildings are going up, more flats are going up all the time, and there's definitely, you know, more of a shortage of housing. That being said, there are plenty of properties that have been bought up in the centre of London that are completely uninhabited by, you know, Russian and Arab billionaires, and they've been doing that for years. There's like so much within the centre that's owned but, you know, uninhabited, not even rented out for Airbnb or anything, literally just uninhabited to artificially drive up property prices. What percentage of, you know, exactly, you know, figures to exactly how many of those properties, you know, equate to, I don't know, the dwelling of however many thousand or hundreds of thousands or even more, maybe even just tens of thousands of people, I'm not sure. And you know, what effect that would have on, you know, what people would deem as yeah, a sizable part of the population. But yeah, your thoughts on that, and you've also got some interesting thoughts on Eric Dubai, full stop, I believe, if you want to.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we know objectively that the technology and the intellectual capacity available within the realm of, let's just say, evil, so the status quo, those that govern, you know, each and every aspect of our existence, they can pick and choose anyone. You know, people get headhunted from the off, whether they're a part of the cabal or not, you know, from school, primary, secondary, tertiary education. The most intellectual individuals are available at all times to those that govern the realm. So the idea, the notion that there are people that come across as very, very honest individuals, that come across as, you know, not being controlled up and are, you know, genuine in their kind of directive to seek truth. I think most of the time, especially when they have a platform available to them, that platform is being given to them because either, now this is that question which comes up a lot, either they are complicit in the sense of they are knowledgeable about, you know, the fact that they are given that platform, that plinth, and are essentially working to sustain their existence off of a false premise. You know, they're essentially bought and paid for individuals. Or sometimes, I won't deny, it's the case that there are people that undertake what they feel is the truth, but unfortunately at the same time they're kind of, you know, they're very much aligned to the, you know, the status quo, because I don't know how to explain it. I'm getting distracted here in the shower in my in my Mexican abode. Various distractions happening around me. So yeah, you know, they're just kind of a part of the system indirectly. You know, they're being used essentially. They're malleable tools, and they're not always aware that what they're doing is negative and bad. And they might be very honest and kind of, you know, open with their perspective, but unfortunately that just might be benefiting those that govern, and that's why they're allowed to have their platform. Again, it's not dissimilar to the prior example, the former. They are gifted the platform, but they're just not, what's the word I'm looking for, James? They're just not fully intertwined. They're not complicit. That's the word in the system. But regarding regarding Eric Dubay and the population, for me, this idea, this notion that we're not overpopulated was always the kind of original agenda of the status quo, right? They were always like, you know, there's plenty of space for us all, there's loads of arable land, you know, we have the capacity to live pretty much everywhere, it can be self-sufficient, self-sustainable. And then now they're pushing the narrative that there's too many people and everyone needs to essentially be centralized, which is the aim of the game, into kind of cityscapes, going to the examples that we know exist in Saudi Arabia, which are being constructed at such a rapid rate now, with money which is literally coming out of thin air, because money itself is, of course, just a farce. It's a falsity. It's not real. You know, an extra digit can be added to the computer and taken away, deducted at any moment in time. So they're creating a construction project called The Line. And The Line is the scariest thing that anyone will ever see in their lives. If they haven't already researched it, Google The Line, have a look at what the Saudis are building now. It's essentially a reflective block of continuous abodes going through the desert where there's actually no real natural water supply. So people become completely reliant on the state for everything. And that line can be segregated and separated at any moment. So if you've got a line, I believe it's like 130, 40, 50 kilometers long. That's just off the top of my head. I don't know if that's completely accurate. But imagine a continuous road, and you implant a roadblock at any moment. You implant some kind of you know, you make it into jurisdictions, and people are completely cut off from the rest of the world. It's essentially a prison, and that's the aim of the game. That was the purpose all along, from migrating people from areas in the world where they had the capacity to live off the land and to be self-sufficient, and they had, you know, the resources to live without relying on state aid. And once everyone is condensed and consolidated in a saturated environment like London or New York or, you know, Melbourne, Sydney, Rio, wherever you can imagine, they become entirely reliant on the state, which is what we're seeing. We're seeing a welfare system. We're seeing a system where people can be squeezed for tax. Property prices fluctuate at such a rate that, you know, the next day people can't afford the rent. And that's keeping people in perpetual instability. And perpetual instability is the main tool, you know, of the status quo. They govern through fear, and they govern through that kind of feeling in the back of one's head that tomorrow someone might not be able to, you know, feed their kids, and consequently people are willing to sacrifice more of their liberties to pay for the necessities of life. People are willing to, you know, jab their children with 1,000 different, you know, untested vaccines or whatever. And I say that loosely, vaccines in inverted commas. Yeah, they're willing to feed their kids cheaper food that they know is bad for them. They're willing to, you know, they're willing to essentially lock themselves in for 3 months under the auspice that there's a fucking zombified, you know, virus contaminating the world. You know, it's that idea that we're kind of we're overcrowded, and therefore we need to condition that overcrowding to a kind of a disciplined fashion. So for me, yeah, I think that's the overview of. I don't know if I answered the question entirely with respect to Eric Dubay, but I'm sure the viewers are aware that I think he's a total shill. And then in terms of his background and the fact that a man with such, and I wouldn't go as far to say as I don't think he's exceptionally talented. He's very charismatic. He's a good orator. But just from a practical standpoint, the amount of material that this guy is apparently putting out there to the world, which I agree is of a very high standard, doesn't seem possible, A, with the type of personality that he defines himself as, which is a hippie yoga man living in Thailand. And, in order to write such a number of books and in order to be a videographer at such a consistent level, and he's not just utilizing YouTube, he's utilizing so many platforms, it just doesn't seem like there's that number of hours in the day. I mean, of course, you've got to account for the research and all these kinds of things and, the editing and the verification. He's certainly not a solo project, which is what he brands himself as. And again, why is it that his platform on YouTube has so many subscribers when people with that kind of narrative are being censored every single day, and he finds himself up there in the sky, seemingly without any kind of opposition from the YouTube terms and conditions? It's because he's working for them. Because if they don't allow a sprinkle of oppositionary thoughts, then it becomes too obvious that the world is completely condensed in one pattern and is controlled by one system of authority. And for me, he is an absolute prime example of shillery.
Okay, so what I would say in opposition to that is given like who he is, how well he's known, amongst I don't think he has that many subscribers. I think he has under 200k subscribers.
That's a lot. That's a lot of subs, though, and all of those subs were, I believe, at one point
under 200k. And this is somebody who has like been on the Joe Rogan podcast, like, for example. There's somebody who's
has he been on the Joe Rogan podcast?
He has been on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Has he actually?
Joe Rogan,
right, well, that's just solidified it for me. I had no idea.
No,
I had no idea about that.
They never let him go back on. And on top of this, he was supposed to debate Neil deGrasse Tyson, who absolutely is an evil Masonic shill. 100%. Neil deGrasse
100%,
Tyson, like, he doesn't believe the shit that comes out of his mouth. It's just like
he actually giggles at it when he spews it. Like
exactly. Yeah, the world looks like a pear. Yeah, it's lopsided. Like, what the fuck? Like, nobody says that. Like, that's literally his own thing. Like, nobody else thinks that. Or nobody else says that. That's not even part of the scientific status quo. The world looks like a fucking pear. It's just absolute. Yeah. This is part of the reason why we're, lost as a people, like, like the human species, is that like people's inability to think freely, rightly or wrongly. In some ways it's better to have like a crazy person who thinks the sky is red instead of blue, because at least they're thinking outside the box and they see this from a different perspective, and there's something individual and unique about them as opposed to sheeple who literally listen to whatever, Mr. BBC or CNN or Fox News or Sky News says, what the government says, it's like it's just, like what their favorite politician says. The fact that people even have favorite politicians, the fact that people, it's bizarre. Like, people haven't worked like that. It's a pantomime yet that, you've been alive for 30 years and like no matter who's in power, things go in the same direction. Like, people just can't seem to, see these basic things. But anyway, back to Eric, because I've gone on a little bit of a tangent. He under 200k and like on a very, very, widespread, like, he's essentially the authority in the field. He's 100% being shadow banned by YouTube. Like, he doesn't come up on, like, none of his videos come on. Even if you type in titles of some of his videos, they will not come up. Only if you're a subscriber to his channel do you get him as a recommendation. Or he's definitely been shadow. 100% he's been shadow banned by YouTube. And that whole topic that he speaks on has been shadow banned from Google completely. So he gets credence, and he's not said anything as of yet that one has been able to debunk. So if he's disseminating truths, and like, when the guy talks, he seems very genuine. The only question mark that I would have over him is the fact that his uncle was a high-ranking Mason. I think it was maybe like a 32nd degree Mason,
Sure, but
which
I feel like he was the one that
openly
revealed that.
admits. Yeah,
That's the problem. He did reveal that, did he not? So we're
he
putting
did.
our trust in the information that he's spewing, which for me, as I've already stated, is now emphasised by the fact that, at least I feel it's emphasised by the fact that he was on Joe Rogan's show. The man is the epitome of that shillery. But returning just briefly to what you said with respect to, the viewership and the shadow banning and all that kind of stuff, I absolutely agree that he has been shadow banned. However, that in itself, in my opinion, is a part of their system of kind of aiding the kind of notion that these people are legitimate. You build them up and then you knock them down enough that you kind of erase any doubt in the minds of audience members who are on the fence, or whether or not this person might be a shill or not, because they've received that shadow ban, because their subscriber count is now frozen and stagnant. It kind of validates the fact in the minds of the doubters that no, this person's legitimate. And also at the same time, you can't build someone up all the way, because of course a lot of what he says is truth, because of course when you give people something, that reward, you gain more and more respect, and then you can sprinkle some bullshit in there enough to actually kind of like break the connections for people to be able to fully understand the reality of what's happening. Then they put what's like a false flag scenario they throw in from time to time, and I think they do this a lot with people. They can't have someone with like 2, 3, 4 million subscribers, because the negatives end up being more than the positives from their perspective, right? Because again, though there's that shillery out there, and there are those lies that are being sprinkled in on top of the cake. There are going to be people that can see through it, and of course, if you've got 4 million subscribers and even 10% of those can see through the bullshit, that's too much for them to handle. So 2,000 subscribers is enough to stagnate the channel. He's still got that kind of that media prominence, that position within the streaming community. But he's not dangerous enough that he's going to start having a negative effect on their game plan, I would say. Articulating that poorly, but I think the gist is being
right. So I mean, for me, Eric, he's completely had his legs cut off. Like he's not somebody that can make any change. Like he's so low level. Then on the other hand, you've got Alex Jones. Oh my god, like literally Hollywood McDonald's shill. Like David Icke, Hollywood McDonald's shill. Like these people literally have shows, great production. They have bookings at the Royal Albert Hall, Wembley Arena. And they're still going. Like they're still going.
Yeah.
David Icke was being deplatformed, but still going at like a high level. Things are monetized. These people make money. And they also have very clear mainstream links in terms of who Alex Jones.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah. David Icke, obviously, former BBC, former professional goalkeeper. Lots of and another thing with David Icke and Alex Jones is that they've both said things that are 100% proven to be untrue. Like David Icke with all this fucking reptilian shit, and that Earth was formed by a collision with Mars, and like things that are absolutely 100% provable lies. Thanks, ironically, to the work of people like Eric Dubai that have proved that space is a hoax, in terms of exactly how it's presented. Of course, there's something outside of this realm, but in terms of what that is, we've not been there, which, can be proven. There's absolutely no proof that we've been, out of that, and it makes no sense that we could get out of that, out of this, realm, given that there's a firmament, holding us in. And all of this is, some of it's actually documented in encyclopedias pre-1954. They spoke openly about the firmament. It's just, it's all there and pretty much in plain sight.
But that just supports the idea, doesn't it? That the aim of the game is just to slice and dice the alternative kind of historical channels as much as possible, alternative political minds as much as possible, because you have all of these people in the wagon. You got people like David Icke, you got people like Alex Jones, you got people like Eric Dubay, and I guess the list is endless. And they all have a different stature. They all have different subscriber counts, different levels of viewership, different audiences. Period. But that's the purpose, right? None of them are consolidated into one narrative. they're all seemingly on the same page, but they're all so different intentionally, in my opinion. And I think you would agree that we've acknowledged that Alex Jones and David Icke are complete shills, completely funded by the state system, but they themselves have been shadow banned now. So the fact that they've been shadow banned, I don't see there being a difference between them and Eric Dubé. Just because Eric Dubé is smaller in terms of, you know, his audience, is that really? But of course, they can't just have, you know,
there's nothing
a load of
mainstream. Like,
people
he
with
never
2, 3,
got to
4
the
million.
mainstream. David Icke was
No,
on
I
the
would say,
fucking Terry Wogan show. Alex
oh,
Jones
completely.
is
But,
like,
but we've
literally a
just
celebrity
acknowledged
in
that he got a
America.
Joe Rogan invite. Eric Dubé got a Joe Rogan invite, and Joe Rogan is
Joe
the biggest podcast in the world and a complete shill himself, probably ex-Mossad, probably current Mossad. And, you know, that the aim of the game is just, it's a propaganda channel like all media, is it not?
So not everybody that goes on the Joe, because, you know, probably, let's just say the idea for him to on the Joe Rogan show was to make a fool of himself, and for people to kind of like see, like, yeah, look at this quackery, this flat earth quackery that, you know, this guy's talking about. And apparently he went on there, and, you know, Joe Rogan completely mocks him. Joe Rogan wasn't there like, oh yeah, what he said's really cool. It was like Joe Rogan was like, you know, rolling his eyes, and like, I think, you know, it didn't come off well. And then loads of videos came out after that debunking his 200 proofs video, which is almost like a flat earth Bible. Anybody who wants to understand the geology, the true geology and shape, for lack of a better term, of this realm that we live in, that's a good start. 200 proofs, Earth is not a spinning ball by Eric Dubé. And since then, like, loads of like debunking, debunking 200 proofs. Like, there used to be like around about 2015 to 2017, that was like the thing, like loads of videos out, like kind of like debunking flat Earth, you know, Eric Dubé, this, that. And he's never had a sniff of the mainstream since he was in Eric. Yeah, he was on the Joe Rogan show maybe about 6 or 7 years ago. He was laughed out of town. He offered to have a debate with Neil deGrasse Tyson, which never happened because obviously it would have been very dangerous. Because Eric Dubé, he's like you said, a good orator. He would have come prepared, and he would have said things that are irrefutable because they are. And yes, and
But
since then the blackballing has gone to another realm for him. And also, he doesn't monetize his YouTube channels either. They're not monetized.
oh, well, that's another thing. He doesn't monetize it. So where does the income come from? I mean, you know, to be fair, one can make income themselves. But
Yeah,
again,
absolutely.
I'm returning to the time it takes to undertake such, you know, high levels of work and research. It's just not feasible for one person. If they're, you know, who's to say he's not working in a team? And of course, there's nothing wrong with not revealing that. But returning quite quickly just to the point of, you know, the idea that he was brought onto the Joe Rogan show to be humiliated and all this kind of stuff. Of course, Joe Rogan is just a nobody in the kind of the pyramid scheme. You know, there are editors and producers and people at the top that have more kids in basements compared to Rogan, and they're, you know, these people are intelligent creatures, and I think creatures is the right word. They're cretins. They're evil. They're, you know, they're malleable tools of the Baphomet and satanic entities that govern them. And of course, the pyramid scheme is potentially endless, and there are people at the top that might not even be people. Who fucking knows? But the producers are still higher than Rogan, and these people are intelligent. They know, they can judge a character. They know Eric Dubé, if we are to believe that he's an honest, non-shill, and, you know, he's really obviously an intelligent guy, irrespective of such. He's certainly no match for, you know, their kind of open shills like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Joe Rogan and stuff like that. So the humiliation is intended just to bolster his presence in that kind of alternative community, because now we're having that very conversation, and you're using that as an example to solidify the belief that he is genuine. And I'm not saying it's an absolute that he's not genuine, but that's the exact purpose, and it's clearly paid off because we're using it as an example in favor of him being genuine. The fact that he was taken on these shows, humiliated, and that's the reason why we should trust him, and that's exactly what they want. For me, returning back now to the origin of the question, the very debate itself, I guess, which I believe you opened with, you know, the discussion as to what the true population of the Earth is. So, as far as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, he believes there's what, about 1.5 billion people on this planet. Is that true?
Yeah, I believe it was something around that number. Yeah.
For me, that's so unbelievably insane, and I will give examples, that the man has to be just an open joke, because again, for someone to supposedly produce all of these works which do debunk things like, you know, the Earth being spherical and all this kind of stuff, and you know, he does make so many great points, as do many others that perhaps might be shills. But then to come out and say something like the Earth has only 1.5 billion people is insane. If we take the cities of London, Paris, you know, Berlin, Lyon, Marseille, even places like Prague with a couple of million people, if we take all of the places in Europe that we ourselves have traveled to and seen, there's clearly a fuck ton of people on this planet. And then when you go to somewhere like India, where you've got huge cities, vast cities, you know, the tracts of land that one sees from an aeroplane is surely enough for anyone to realize that it's just not feasible for there to be 1.5 billion people on the planet. Like, for someone to make that claim, it just doesn't seem, it's just insanity. It's insanity from my perspective, because for me, like, just even walking through a smallish place like Puerto Escondido, you know, you say, okay, so there's like, you know, 10 restaurants on the right, 10 restaurants on the left. There's like 50 people in each, and some people living in the buildings above. This is a tiny place in the kind of like in the scheme of things, compared to, again, these big cities like Jakarta or Delhi or Tokyo or wherever. And, you know, this place has probably got like 500,000 people popping in and out constantly. And this is just one of many places all along the coast. It's probably not 500,000 people here, to be fair, a little bit less, probably significantly less. But the idea just that there's only 1.5 billion people in all these towns and all these cities. And your example of the infrastructure, I would agree with, but I would say there's a different reason for it. For sure, there's a lot of you know, there are a lot of buildings that are abandoned, not utilised, and whatever. Central London being a prime example, Duke of Westminster owns pretty much everything. He's an open multi-billionaire, biggest property magnate in the UK. So many places are just, you know, essentially derelict inside, just big empty spaces. But that's just a business. Yeah, that's got, for me, there's no correlation between that and discerning what the true population of this planet is. That's just people trying to increase rents and gain more financial leverage. I don't see them as connected things. That said, there is another debate to be had as to past populations, which goes in, I guess, into another video, and like the idea of resets and stuff. Because for sure, if we look at ancient cities, you know, take Siem Reap in Cambodia, you know, take Machu Picchu, all the kind of famous atypical tourist places, you know, Mexican or Mayan temples in Tulum, it's clear that the population that they state existed in these places historically is a complete falsity. Absolutely. Yep. I 100% agree with that. I mean, if we just look at the infrastructure available to us today that, you know, is depicted as being 19th century, 18th century, 16th century, 2000 years old, it's completely impossible, in my opinion, that take Machu Picchu, there was only a couple of thousand people on and off constructing these sites over hundreds of years. It's absolutely ludicrous. And, you know, again, we know for a fact that there's plenty more infrastructure buried out in the jungle as a consequence of the cataclysms that continuously exist in accordance to systems of ages that we have, you know, age of Aquarius, age of this, age of that. Sounds very farcical and fantastical to a lot of people that perhaps aren't into it. I'm not into star signs or anything like that. I'm not a spiritualist. It's not my personal kind of interest, let's say. However, it does have validity in discerning that everything works in cycles. People work in cycles, animals work in cycles. Nature is a giant cycle, and we are a part of nature. There is a cause and effect for everything. Order through chaos is the motto of Freemasonry and every fraternal subsidiary that exists within that realm. It is an open fact, for sure, that there were at points a vast number of people in comparison to perhaps ages after that. However, right now, the question is, are there 1.5 billion people on this planet? Absolutely not. It's a ridiculous statement. There's probably double the amount that they state, in my opinion, which is what, about 7.5 billion, I guess, at this point. I think there's way, way more. And I think there's way, way more because when you look at it on a macro level, or a micro level, I should say, you know, you go to your own town, your own city, and you say, okay, so the official narrative is that there's 200,000 people in said place, but you see it, and there's got to be 400k. It's just the number of people we see in the street, and of course, it works both ways. There are definitely places where, you know, it can be the opposite. But for me, I just can't see how it's feasible, and therefore, by default, Eric Dubé is a shill.
Right, so it's funny you say that about you can't see how it's feasible, because as I opened, it's like visibly to me, I see more people, I see things are more busy. However, what I found compelling in that video is when you spoke about places like India and their populations and the population of India is supposed to be like, 1 point something billion. But when you actually calculate the official census and the number of people in the 300 most populated regions in India, it doesn't come to anywhere near that figure. So
yeah, but no one follows the censuses. That's the thing, especially in India of all places. If you take the Indian population in the UK or just any non-regulated individual in the UK, no one does a census. I don't even believe as a UK national I've even done a census in my life. So if we go down Peckham Road, half the people in there doing a census. If we go to Blackburn, Accrington, Stanley, none of those people are doing censuses because those people don't really exist, because most of them are working within the periphery of the EU, or most of them are illegal. And I can say that as an objective fact, having lived in Blackburn for 2 years, literally half the town are like illegal residents. So if that's half a town that are illegal, they're not showing up. No, literally half of Blackburn is just non-British individuals that are essentially working there illegally. And and if we are to say that is, and I'm not saying that's completely objective, that is my opinion, I believe it to be so. But if we were even to take a fraction of that figure, if we were, no, but let's say even 10%, let's say 10% of the town, right? And we were to calculate that and apply it to every city in the UK, every town, not just the UK, but the world. And obviously with respect to this, we're talking about India. If you go through the slums of Mumbai or you go through the slums of Delhi, how many of those people are actually recorded? How is it even feasible for a government to know how many people are being born in those areas? So a census for me is just a simple mechanism for which the government can say, okay, we need to implant this piece of legislation or this political policy based off of some fantastical figure that they've just concocted out of absolutely nowhere. Because by the laws of logic, there is absolutely no practical way to discern how many people live in many, many places on this planet. Not everywhere, but especially big cities. It's just not feasible.
So I'll tell you what you can do. If we just look at recorded births and deaths, because those figures. Okay, so let's just say you can't equate. I think 10% is still an extremely generous figure to use, but let's just say we want to use that 10% figure for illegal immigrants. That's like 1 in 10 people. And there are going to be certain towns that literally have like no illegal immigrants, like very few, especially like, lots of like, villages. And then you're going to have some that, that definitely do have, a higher percentage. And yeah, immigration is something that, is enforced. There are a lot of illegal immigrants here, but they are registered as illegal immigrants and they are held in places. But you do get some that kind of just make it on the farms and like, they're just working, for gypsies, and they're being human trafficked and are used as prostitutes, and
take gypsies as a prime example. That's a prime example. Not a single gypsy is registered on a censor. That's probably an exaggeration, but probably 95%. Police won't even go into gypsy camps.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is though, is that do we know like how many there are? Like, how often do we see them? It's like every area might have like a few hundred. Like, I don't think.
I don't think it's a crazy amount. I would probably say, I don't know, 200,000 to 300,000 maybe in the whole of the United Kingdom. So Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and UK. I would say that's a pretty fair figure if we take, just every. And that's Romany gypsies as well. That's Albanian gypsies. That's Irish travellers. Yeah, but that's one cultural group. So let's take the Pakistanis, right? Let's take the Indians. Let's take people from North Africa. Let's take people from Europe. Let's take people from Poland, Bulgaria. All of these people have the freedom. Well, many of them have the freedom to move, or did within the kind of periphery of the so-called European Union, the fascist entity,
and the Commonwealth,
communist fucking dystopian Commonwealth, to move in. And let's not, beat around the bush. We know for sure that the main object of moving to Europe is certainly not for the weather, not for the culture, because the culture is so dissimilar. You're coming from a place which is very unified in terms of family. The food's fucking great. The weather's often great. The reason people move to Europe is because they're poor and they need money. Period.
Absolutely.
Full stop. End of.
100%.
Exactly.
But 90-something percent.
But 95%. So people are going to do absolutely anything they can to twiddle the system as much to their favor. People literally spew out babies. Again, we have this belief in the West that, life has at least a value for
right,
most
they
people.
do.
But in many cultures, they don't give a fuck. A baby is simply a tool. It's just a tool. You spew it out to get more benefits. And we obviously had that conversation recently with the British family that had the same thing. Yeah, but for sure. But realistically, the reality is most non-Europeans that are coming to Europe for gains, which we've just acknowledged is the sole factor, or 95% of the time is the sole factor for their migration, will do absolutely anything to gain as many benefits as possible. And in addition to that, they're more capable, they're more competent because they come from communities where there's so many people. It's a lot poorer, thus the competition is far, far higher. The standards are high. Every ounce of rice has to be placed at a certain point during the day to try and gain as much attraction on the high street, because every other vendor is selling the exact same thing in the exact same bag. When you go through these markets, every bit of produce is polished and laid out perfectly, infinitely, under the hope that maybe 2 or 3 kilos of tomatoes will be purchased in one day. And yet everything is done to such a degree of like slyness or coyness, we should say, that when you then apply that to a lazy society, which is for sure the Western world now, we've become very lazy, because we're on the downward spiral. Just like everything, there's the up, there's the down, the progression and the deprogression. It's just a fucking they're just like a kid in a candy shop. That's why when gypsies come over to the UK and they just see this fucking old abandoned churches everywhere with a shitload of lead on the roof, straight on that, you've got statues that get melted down, train tracks have been taken up, you've got little puny fucking cases with all the electrical wiring on every street corner. That all gets ripped up as well because it's there for the taking. That's money to be had. They see opportunity because they come from a society where you have to see opportunity to survive. You've got to fight for your existence, and to not take advantage of a welfare system which is willing to give money for things that are so mundane to them, like spewing out another kid. I mean, that sounds really shocking. I'm not applying this to everyone, but that's very realistic. The idea that there is not a shitload of people that aren't registered in the UK is insane. It's out there. That's my opinion. I think there's a lot. But
in order to get these said benefits, you need to be registered. So you're right. They are coming over and having children, and they're registering
some
them
of to a degree.
in order to get to get the said benefits.
Well, not all of them. For example, if you were to spew, let's say, spew is a really bad word. I shouldn't use that. If you were to birth 2 children, right? If you were to birth 2 children, by the way, for the audience,
my friend
spew. I'm not applying spew to specific cultures. Just so the audience knows, I believe that most people on the planet, irrespective of who they are useless. Like, for the most part, wherever you are in the world, majority of people anywhere are just not. I'm not saying they're bad people intrinsically. I'm just saying they're not doing anything that is, progressing. Their own intellectual advancement. Their own intellectual advancement is
Agreed.
the intellectual advancement of all. And I'm certainly not, taking the stance of the shill cabal people that create often, though there is obviously a certain biological environmental factors. I'm certainly not a fucking communist in any way. I hate the notion of welfare systems and this kind of stuff because it breeds the idea that you aren't responsible for your own actions. And I think that's the core and the crux of socialism, so-called liberalist values. I think it's absolute poison because it prevents people from actually getting off their hind legs and and disciplining themselves in a way that might or hopefully benefit them. That's why I think liberalism is disgusting. It promotes the degradation of society. So I don't want to go down that angle, but I think we have to be realistic, and I would say I'm a realist. Again, you can define that in any way you want, but realistically speaking, people have to put effort in to achieve, and people don't, and therefore most people that don't are a bunch of wankers, and that is most people.
No, I have to agree. It's like people literally will, I don't know, spend like 5 years on that further education to still go and take a jab. It's like that literally hasn't been tested.
Exactly.
Believe it's going to work. Yeah. It's like, what the hell?
Which is a lot of people.
And we go back to what we're talking about, in regards to just like people with like the inability to, think critically or, outside of the box. It's just like it's frightening. I'd rather take somebody, who's a little bit crazy, who says things that maybe don't make sense, but at least, there's something unique to that person, albeit they're not correct. Something just has to be admired about them and not conforming to
I couldn't
others,
agree
like,
more with
to
that.
impose at least
Agree more.
yeah, conforming to their own nonsense. Yeah, okay, it's nonsense, but conforming to somebody else's nonsense, it's like, what the fuck's all that about? Like, yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. I completely agree. Someone's gone out of their way to mold themselves in a way that's different to other human beings. They command respect, irrespective of if I agree with them or not. I do like the fact that they are different to other people.
Indeed.
I'm not going to go as far as to apply that to fucking pedophiles that have got like 10 9-year-olds in the basement and they get whipped.
Exactly.
Without I don't contradict myself. I don't respect the. I'm making a statement which is a universal respect just for alternative perspective. But of course, this is very difficult not to contradict yourself here, isn't it? Because I'm kind of saying,
there are exceptions
the
for
fact
every rule.
10-year-olds in the basement, but I don't agree with that specific. they're following their dream. Let's be honest.
Actually, because meticulous thinkers would certainly pick up on. So, this
and I would hope our
all
audience
kinds of
are meticulous thinkers. Yeah. No, yeah, because then it goes into, ironically, we come back round, don't we? If we take that stance and we don't overlay a strong set of kind of, I don't want to use the word regulatory because then we come into the whole fascist territory. But if we don't like really impose the absolute value set of what we're talking about, then we turn into the liberals that are like, well, why is it, in this exact accent, by the way, why is it not okay to marry 10-year-olds and 9-year-olds? That's what I identify as. And at the end of the day, I'm a map. I'm a minor attracted person. All this bullshit.
Exactly.
That's where the line is. And I think the line is basically, realistically, we have to acknowledge that everything in life is an opinion. And though there isn't an absolute, we can get pretty close to all agreeing as a society that certain things are good and bad. And, that is going to contradict probably quite a lot of things that we've said. But again, going back to the idea of realism, acknowledging that not everything is absolutely achievable to the absolute degree, we can say that, okay, 99% of pedos or, that are fucking doing whatever probably should be thrown in jail or killed or something like that. There might be a 1% instance where there's just something so crazy, like the person's fucking, I don't know, got like 3 brains and 2 heads and they didn't know what they were doing at the time because someone pumped them full of fucking acid without them knowing. Just stupid things. There's always going to be an anomaly, but realistically, we can't always judge by absolutely, and we just have to fucking make a few sacrifices from time to time. Again, getting into dubious territory with the whole sacrificial, it's okay to kill 100 if 95 are bad, or is it okay to divert the train to save 1,000 people, but you're killing 10 on the track? It goes down that philosophical anecdote, which I think we brought up before in previous chats. But again, being realistic, let's just go with the flow and say, let's get rid of 99% of people. I'm just kidding, of course.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously we handpick who stays.
Yeah, of course we handpick. Yeah, because it's our opinion. So that's that whole, again, the oxymoron and the contradiction. Like, whoever is in power gets to choose, right? I guess it's the kind of age-old law
we hate
of
dictators, but we want to
survival. We hate dictators, but we want to dictate. Absolutely, because everyone thinks they're right at the end of the day. It's that intrinsic, survivalist instinct that we all have. We are creatures in a competitive environment where we have to strive to live based off of pushing our opinion on others.
Exactly.
Especially if others don't agree with it. That's just the reality of biological existence. That said, though, I think we can agree, based off of what we've just said, with the example of everyone wants to be a dictator, that some dictators are worse than others. Like, objectively, I think it's fair to say if you've got 2 dictators, they run 2 countries parallel to each other. Both countries have 50 million people in them. They all look the same. They're all the same height. They all eat the same food. It's the same economy. The dictators are the same age. Every data set is almost comparable. But one dictator wakes up on a Monday morning at 7:03 a.m. and says, okay, I'm going to kill 25 million people. And the other dictator in the parallel world, which is exactly the same aesthetically, virtually the same, wakes up at 7:03 and says, okay, I'm going to kill 49 million people. I think we can objectively say that the guy that killed the 49 million people is worse than the guy that killed 25 million.
Although who were the people. There's still nuances within this, because you might have woken up and said, there's 25 people that are going to be, there's 25 million people that are going to be killed, upstanding citizens. But the 49 million people that are going to be killed are going to be like the worst of the worst, the criminals, the rapists, the nonces, and so and so. So, who is being killed? And then it's kind of like, unwrap it and unravel it. And it's like, well, you go into the nuts and bolts of it, and it's a can of worms.
It is a can of worms. It is a can of worms. And should we conclude to our audience? But no, keep going.
Well,
we're still on it.
Before we conclude, just one more thing. I just recalled, and this is a major feather in Eric Dubé's cap. A topic that he has spoken on openly, which I think is probably something that's got him blackballed more than his flat Earth work, is he spoke openly about the Holocaust hoax. He has got videos on this. And this is something that very few people speak on. And I think he deserves, he deserves a lot of credit for that. The guy's work is, as you said, admittedly, is of a very high quality. He hasn't made any prominent videos for a couple of years. They're all like very short videos, and all of it's kind of like rehashed. There'll be like 8-minute videos here, 14-minute videos there. He does a lot of podcasts these days where he actually puts his face on camera with like a guest.
Yeah.
Because most of what he has to say is out there. He's made his material. He's like, look, this is what it is. Occasionally, he'll come with something, new, or he'll kind of hone in on a specific angle of something that he's covered before. But yeah, I think, as we know, that anybody, and you're saying that he's somebody with a platform, I think in this day and age, somebody with 200k followers on, like, there's just so many shitty channels on YouTube that have got way more. It's like, he's a mid-range YouTuber at best. Like, he is just...
Yeah, but the topic itself is not something that's generally popular to people. Going again back to the notion that most people are, in essence, just kind of scummy. That does tell by, like you say, the amount of shit works that have like billions of subscribers almost, or hundreds of millions. But at the same time, there are people that are better and, better equipped to kind of, discern truths and, kind of elaborate, and more charismatic individuals that have virtually no subscribers.
On that
there's
topic,
people that
I'm
are
not aware of them. On that particular topic,
Well, but that's the thing. It's because they have no. It's because they have no. They have no, capacity to share their work. But I do have examples. I do have folders. I will share these channels with you. I think there's quite a few people, even the ones that we're aware of. Take what's her name? The lady you like,
Michelle Gibson.
Michelle Gibson. How many subscribers has she got? She's probably not got two. She's probably got about 80k.
Yeah, I think it's about 70. Yeah, I was going to say 70k, like maybe like 68k or something.
I don't know how long her channel has been going, but I think, I did unsubscribe from her for said reasons, but I do think her work is even of a way higher degree than Eric Dubé's. I think she really puts in like phenomenal amount of effort. But again, we are talking about niche subjects. I've subscribed to a lot of gardening channels and stuff like that. And I would say this to the audience. The reason I do that is because one thing people shouldn't do is fill their subscriber feed with a lot of political stuff, because generally it's always going to be negative, because we ourselves, myself and James, and of course, if you're listening to this, you most likely hold similar perspectives as to, what is the purpose of mainstream media. It's of course filled with shit and nonsense and stuff. And, if you even subscribe to individuals that are true in their outlook, that's filling up your subscriber feed, it gets quite negative. So I've got all these gardening channels and I diversify. But there's some of these channels that are just fucking phenomenal, things that perhaps aren't even as niche as what we're talking about. For example, there's a guy, packgoats.com. It's a guy that runs a goat farm, basically, one of the biggest goat farms in one of the most respected goat goat herders, whatever you want to call them, goat farm. I don't even know what the specialized term is for these individuals, but one of the most respected guys, relating to his knowledge of the subject for 2-3 decades. This guy's got I think he's got 37,000 subscribers. And actually, most of those have only just come about in, let's say, the last year or so. This guy's been running for years and getting a handful, bringing out videos almost every week consistently, good quality, really fun to watch. Really rate the guy, patgoats.com. And that's something that, you know, relates to farming. And for me, I would imagine farming, especially goats, though it does seem to be niche. There's enough fucking goats in the world to command an audience. People like their pets. I would argue that it's way, way more popular a subject than you know, alternative historical theories, you know, mud floods and kind of the shape of our world and so on and so forth. And yet they have nothing. And, you know, so I don't think I think 200K. And again, looking at his competitors, I think John Levy is probably the chap with the largest following in the sector. I think he must be pushing on about 350, 400K now. And that's the guy that's top end. So there's no one else, as far as I'm aware, that has more subscribers than John Levy that is in the realm of this kind of subject matter. So, you know, indeed it's small, but also it's a small subject. And, you know, you can take anything. You can take fucking badminton. I'm sure like the #1 badminton channel is also relatively small. But I still think 200K and 400K is a lot for the subject. That contradicting myself.
I would say in a world of 8 billion people. Allegedly.
Yeah, but we're talking. Yeah, no. I would say 16 billion, and also we got to, you know, acknowledge that not only is it pertaining to English-speaking channels, but also the internet has been divided so much now. So there are things that I can't watch on YouTube in Mexico that are on my save folders that you'll be able to watch in England. They've created this market where they, you know, everything is based solely on the audience in question. Because otherwise, everything's geo-block. Everything, you know, they create narratives through the media. They mold people from youth. You know, you're on your TikTok, your Instagram, you'll see completely different feeds in India than you will in Pakistan, and in, you know, China's got their own versions and so on and so forth. So, you know, it is like, I mean, you know, there's so many media streaming channels, and again, a lot of people still don't have access to the internet. A lot of people don't even have the time to watch these videos, and even if they did, they certainly wouldn't think to themselves one day on a Monday morning, you know what, I'm going to look at what the fucking mud flood is, because again, that requires all that background information to get to the point where you're even questioning such things. And it's a fucking life. It's a life of questioning. And of course, in a system where time is, you buy in, absolutely, butt in, James.
just a bit before I forget, is that flat Earth is something that's definitely become a mainstream talking point, to the point where,
I agree.
Yeah, to the point where
it's illegal, isn't it?
Exactly.
The US. They've actually outlawed it. Yeah,
literally blocked it.
Which says it all, really, doesn't it? It really states it. It says it perfectly. If it was that ludicrous and that mental, why would you need to make a certain topic of conversation illegal? If someone came along and said we're all secretly unicorns, because essentially that's the view that they're, you know, pertaining to us as individuals. They're saying, okay, well, the opinion we have is so conspiratorial that we're in essence saying that we're all unicorns. That's just an analogy. Would they make that illegal? Would you make it illegal to talk about all human beings being pink uniforms dressed up in fucking human costumes? Of course you wouldn't. The fact that they make this conversation illegal, the US government has outlawed this conversation, shows that it's completely true.
Exactly. Exactly that. Case rested. But yeah, and I implore anybody listening, or 3, 4, 5, 6 of you, to subscribe to Eric Gabai's YouTube channel.
Well, if you're going to do that, subscribe to us first, and you'll get an alternative perspective on what he says. There we go. But by all means, subscribe to whoever you want. That's the way it should be. And actually, you know, the more different the opinions, the better it is.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, I mean, in all honesty, Eric Dubai, you know, he speaks our language, right? Whether it's coming from a sincere place or not, he's a fantastic information resource on many topics, namely Earth geology, and there are some historical narratives that he unpacks as well, like the Holocaust, the dinosaurs, and I'll put that in inverted commas, both of those actually. Yes, you know, just as a way just to, you know, at least to get a ground, and then maybe just like watch some of his material and let us know in like the comment section even what you think of his potential Schillery level. I would put him very low on the Shill level. John puts him rather high. Just let us know what you
I'll put him
think.
at Schiller clock, which is 12, fucking top of the
Oh,
board.
mate. I mean, the thing is that if he's 12, then like I can and Jones are like platinum 12. They're like platinum 12 o'clock with diamond encrusted hands as it like
Yeah, that's
ticks
fair
to
enough.
midnight. It's like
I'll give him a
yeah.
5 out of 10. If we're doing 1 to 10, I'll give him a 5 because you're absolutely right. People like who we were talking about earlier, David Icke and fucking
They're like
Alex
Michael
Jones. Those
Jackson
are
level.
top of the 10. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And actually, you know, talking about people like Eric Dubai and, you know, subscribing to him and whatnot, if anyone's listening and, you know, wants to know about some extra channels, obviously we'll be talking about them throughout the podcast. But a few that we mentioned already, and I really do recommend checking them out. I'm sure you concur, James. Michelle Gibson is fantastic as an information
wow.
resource, absolute
Wow.
perfection. Yeah, wow, I really, really recommend her. And actually, people like Stellium7, he's into biogeology. Again, very charismatic guy, good orator. You know, he's a very educated individual, and you'll see if you watch his videos that he knows what he's talking about. And other ones off the top of my head, I guess, just to kind of diversify, you could have a look at people like John Levy, and then from there on, if you're clicking on these resources on, say, BitChute or Odyssey, or if you're now listening on YouTube, assuming we set that up, you're obviously going to get recommendations in the sidebars and stuff. And it's always nice to, if you see a short video, just have a little flick, see if you like the channel. And yeah, that's how I guess we expand as a community. So yeah, I guess, should we leave it at that?
Yeah, we shall. Brilliant.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. And I think this was podcast 6, could be 7, but either way, we'll be there again next week. And yeah, feel free to tune in, subscribe, leave a comment, all that good stuff. And yeah, I'll speak to you later, James.
Pleasure as always. Ciao, people.
Au revoir.